Welcome to Innovating Music, a podcast from the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music and the UCLA Center for Music Innovation. I'm your host, Dr. Gigi Johnson. I met Connor Illsley at Canadian Music Week in 2017 and was intrigued by both Combo Bravo, his company or his partnership, but also his way of looking at creativity and innovation, plus his sense of humor kind of rocks. This is an interesting session to listen to as we're talking about virtual reality, but we're talking about it in audio. So we'll try to describe what we're doing with this, but please go to our website to check out links to some of the great work or search for the marvelous video they did for Jazz Cartier and other adventures in the world of Connor Illsley.
Our first large-scale project we shot at the end of 2015, and it was for an artist called Jazz Cartier. And we did a full 2-song music video in monoscopic 360.
Wait, what is monoscopic 360?
So a 360 video is what you would see on YouTube or Facebook, where you can pan around completely. It can also be used in a virtual reality headset.
What makes it monoscopic?
That's sort of where people start to separate 360 video and virtual reality. When you're in the headset, you can actually create 2 different videos, one for the left eye, one for the right eye. And it also comes down to the way you shoot things, and you can create a parallax between the eyes. So as objects become closer, they're slightly different in the left eye than the right eye, and that's what gives us the feeling of depth. So if you ever hold, your hand in front of your eye and close your left eye, it'll open your right eye, it'll seem to jump a little bit. And that's basically how our brain computes depth. So we now have the technology to shoot multiple cameras at the same time and get information similar to how the human eye see left and right in 360. And so we can create things specifically for a VR headset that are in stereoscopic 360 that have an added layer of depth to it.
How the heck did you get into all of this?
When I was in film school, I worked in a lot of the post-production sort of streams. I worked in a lot of sound, a lot of editing, and I was working freelance straight out of college, and I ended up working for, a variety of different agencies and post houses, and I was working for a company called Secret Location, and I was doing a lot of editing for them, and one day they said, hey, do you want to learn how to do VR post-production? And I was like, oh, of course. And pretty much as soon as I started getting into that, I was like, oh, this is amazing, and brought it back to my roommate and now business partner, John Riera, and we immediately said, this is where we should definitely spend a lot of time and energy and try to get the jump on this. And in the following, 2 months, we bought a camera, we started shooting things on spec, just going out and trying to use what networks we had to get into some interesting places. And shortly after that, we got a much-fact government grant to do a Jazz Cartier video, who John had already done, I believe, 2 videos for it, music videos for at the time. And once we got into production for that music video, we spent about 3 months just testing every potential setup we wanted to do. So we were attaching it to a car, we were attaching it to a drone, we had a team who built a specific mount so it could fly on a drone, and it was just weeks and weeks of finding all these minuscule problems that at some points you start to think maybe I'm the first person to have to solve this specific odd problem that I've created, sort of trying to approach this. And from there, it just sort of kept spiraling. And in November, we were in Uganda shooting with UNICEF. I was in China for 2 weeks. December, shooting a GE wind farm. And it just went from there.
We met at Canadian Music Week, and you do have a bit of a Canadian lilt to your voice. I've
never been told that before, actually.
That you have a Canadian lilt. Where are you based out of, and how does that work with your work? You comment on a government grant, which indicates you may not be, of course, in the U.S. because we don't tend to be prolific with technology creative grants.
Yeah, we are based out of Toronto, Canada. Canada has or had a great music video grant system called MuchFact, which has actually just been announced that it may be canceled in the very near future, which is super unfortunate because it's sort of an amazing system where if you have a musical artist, you can put together a treatment and really anyone can apply there's like three different funding tiers ranging from five to about $50,000 depending on the artist and what you're trying to create. But that fund alone has launched, some of the most prolific Canadian, audiovisual artists working the field today. It's launched countless cinematographers, editors, directors, producers. Companies have been completely built on that grant system. So yeah, it's sort of an interesting time right now, seeing that may be going.
So you've been able to not just get involved in innovative ways to capture music, you've been able to find systems to help you out and seemingly finding people globally who'd like to engage with your work.
Yeah, what's been so great is 90% of our jobs have come from word of mouth. And especially, I think we got in at the perfect time into the 360 virtual reality space because we were able to, just from that first music video we did, we were able to show the tests of one of the setups we did to another agency, which then got us to Uganda to shoot UNICEF. And so it was, in that first 6 months, we actually hadn't released a 360 video publicly, but we had already done a music video, an international documentary, and a commercial that were all still just in the process, not even released yet. So it was kind of just, once the snowball got rolling, it was out of control.
You have really made innovation happen in a short order with some interesting partners. This podcast is about innovation. What is innovation to you?
I think innovation is creating fearlessly, especially when we started out in the 360 space. We really tried not to limit ourselves what the tech could do. It was trying to think of scenarios that, if you can create a world around yourself for this specific artist, specifically for that music video, what would it look like? And if you were going to see a car chase between, this rapper and the police, where would be the best seat in the house? So I think innovation for us has always been, how can we create the most amazing scenario and then make the tech work for that? And obviously there are times where you have to compromise and you have to pull things back, but the most rewarding and fun way to work is when, you're creating as purely as possible.
So with the Jazz Cartier video, you have a really nice making of video that you can also find on YouTube about it. And it tells some of the story of how you thought about the innovation process, but what were your kind of innovation process thoughts with that video and thinking about it in a sort of music and personality environment?
I think that, especially with music video, you're ultimately serving the artist and, their piece of music. So you have to keep that in mind. And throughout all the setups of that video, it was, how can we best represent the song and the feeling and the emotion that that's trying to be conveyed. In the second track in that video, 100 Roses, we really tried to take the idea of when jazz performs live, it's, one of the most amazing rap shows you'll ever see because it feels more like a punk show almost. But, at points, Jazz will be out physically walking on the crowd and they'll be holding him up by the feet and he'll be stage diving, all while performing. So it was really trying to take that energy into a more intimate space. So in that final performance, we have 7 different versions of Jazz completely surrounding you in the environment, and he's performing to you, and you're really getting to see that sort of raw energy in every single direction.
But trying to, in many ways, amplify reality and not just replicate it.
Yeah, I think that what's so great about 360 and VR, especially, the ideal way to watch it is in a headset because you're getting, the actual, feeling of being there. And what's so special is right now, I think it's very hard to get someone's full attention. I think when you put a video on YouTube, someone will watch it, but maybe they're also looking at their phone, or maybe they have a second window on their screen that they're also scrolling Facebook. When you put somebody in a VR headset, they have to be watching what you're showing them. It's full undivided attention. So it's really trying to earn that attention as much as you can and, really pay that off.
So is it just the technology that is driving innovation? You're almost framing it the other way around, that it's looking at creating what you're experiencing and then putting the tech to it. Would you be heading the same types of directions without VR and 360, or what is it kind of intertwined?
Um, I think we approach it both ways. I think that was the first project that we had taken on, so we definitely were a little bit more fearless in just how far we could push things. I think now we definitely understand where certain limits are that are set, and now it's creating as much as we can, knowing that and utilizing even where the shortcomings of the tech is and how to utilize that and make it a strength, not a weakness.
Like, what would be
So
an example there?
um, I think for us, it's a lot of what it comes down to now is it's choosing what emerging technologies to go with. In the last year, there's been a lot of different virtual reality and 360 cameras that have come out and approaches by different people. And it's very easy to get caught up in trying to be on the very front runner of that kind of tech. But I think where we try to stand is understanding how to create the best content with the best practices, but not necessarily have to constantly be investing and testing and trying to be the first one out of the gate to have every single new toy, but rather having the knowledge on how to really entertain someone in that area or really tell a story in that space.
What are the challenges of being an innovator? And it sounds like one of the benefits is that you are connecting with other people and resources and tools. What are the challenges of trying to do something unique and different and creating fearlessly as you frame innovation?
I mean, at times it's just exhausting. um, there's just an incredible amount of work and diligence that you need to do as a creator to get to the point where you can actually bring in other artists or brands or clients, to really get to a point where you can offer services that are so new with brand new cutting edge technology. It's so important that you go out being comfortable with that piece of gear, comfortable knowing how it's going to work in post-production, how it's going to be displayed, how it's going to be distributed. It just requires an incredible amount of understanding of technology that's changing minute by minute. We've had jobs where we've, had to pivot in post-production because a whole new feature on, YouTube 360 has come out, or in a way that we're going to show it, or a new plugin has come out that's going to totally make it easier and better on how we're planning to uh, finish and put out a piece of content. So it's just constantly, you kind of have to constantly be able to pivot and understand and use emerging tech, and then also just be prepared for that. But that can also be expensive at times. It can be tiring at times. It can take way more work than you thought at times. So there's definitely, there's definitely a blood, sweat, and tears tax that comes with that innovation.
Is it different in innovating with content that pertains to music than in other sectors? Because you definitely create across a wide.
I think what's cool about music in this creative space is that it lends itself to a lot more abstract approaches. There's a lot of times where we'll be doing something more commercial where it's more about recreating, a beautiful beach in Jamaica as realistically as you can to sell that idea of relaxation. Where, say, even the Jazz Cartier video, it was more how can we enhance this environment with somewhat supernatural elements and put a big purple storm in the distance. Or I think you just strip away the necessity of being completely realistic, and it allows you into a much more abstract space.
Sort of permission to be, or preconception that you can be abstract.
Yeah, I think it just right off the bat it allows you to make something that's, a little bit different, a little bit left of center that doesn't necessarily require every single thing to be as exact as it would be in real life.
Is there also expectation that people can come back multiple times like they would with a song and see different things? Because I realize that just in looking at that Jazz Cartier video, I'm still going to go back and sort of figure out why is that woman lying limp on the ground at the beginning, and what why is that woman lying like a dead person on the ground in the early part?
I don't remember the exact artistic direction at that point. Um,
But the
it was
concept
definitely
of an Easter egg, right? So you can go back and see things, or just notice things differently in creating a surreal versus realistic environment.
for sure. I mean, if you watch Jazz throughout that video, if you follow if you follow him across a room, in the next shot, he'll start in that exact spot where he ended. So the idea was on that one is we wanted to make people look in every sector of the 360 arena that we're creating. There's some videos that we don't like where we see people just having something essentially straight in front of a 360 camera. And you have the ability to look around, but there's nothing, it's not being utilized at all. So with that video in particular, it was we're going to make people look everywhere, and we're going to put things everywhere. We're putting storms in the sky above. We're putting a car chase through a drone shot below. We're doing a car crash. I think you have to use as much of that tool as you can, or else like the worst thing you can do is at the end of the shoot go, oh, this would have been cooler in 16 by 9 if I just shot it with a regular camera.
And yet you have some really rich history of creating great things with a regular camera. Is VR in some ways though, because the technology is here to do it, and yet you're going beyond that and looking at um, all the other technologies that you're playing into, volumetric scanning, other types of immersive media. I mean, so is it the tech? Or are other things pushing innovation and the need for sort of creating the next generation video?
I think for us, we just get excited when we see something that we've never seen before. And I think that was the original, when I first started getting into VR and 360, I would, wake up at 2 in the morning thinking about, oh, what if we did this or what if we did this, and making notes on my phone. And it was just an obsession right off the bat, because especially when you've been trained on how to use, the tools that you're given, and then you see something that uses those same tools for an entirely different way. I think you immediately go, oh, I kind of know how to do that, and it's just going to take learning these few other sort of techniques. That's that's something really special that you don't get very often.
So, what's been your biggest surprise? Biggest surprise in innovating with VR tech, with creating in this space, with sort of thinking through all of this and creating through it? What's been your biggest surprise?
The biggest surprise would probably be just the sheer amount of places that I've gone with it that I would have never thought I would have gotten the chance to go to. I mean, we've gone to Africa twice now. Um, Second time was in Ethiopia. We went to one of the largest refugee camps in the world. I shot the world's largest heavy metal festival in Germany for a week. China, all over the place in China. The Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad, Paris. It's just, it's been a totally surprising way to see the world that I would have never imagined.
What do you see coming up the pike in terms of innovations that are coming? You talked a little bit about volumetric scanning. What's coming up the pike that are things to think about that will enhance your work and world or that other people might want to play with?
I think that some of the most exciting things on our end is just the actual headsets and screens and computers that are actually showing this work becoming better and better. You can shoot at, a super high resolution in camera, but to actually put it in a headset, you end up compressing it to a much smaller size. So as headsets and the screens inside of them become better and better and better, that's just going to make the work look better. It's going to sell the feeling of immersion better. Immersive audio becomes better. I think we're still very much in the early days of what cinematic virtual reality can be. And so I think a lot of these tools that we use, especially to display and distribute these works, are just going to keep getting better and better.
Now, you mentioned immersive audio. What do you mean by immersive audio?
Um, so again, when you're using the headset, and somewhat on YouTube 360, but especially with the headset, you can incorporate head-tracked audio and ambisonic audio, where as you're looking around, say someone walks by you and says something to you, you can make it so that sound is always coming from that direction. So even if you're looking behind you, now that person sounds like they're behind you. If you're looking at them, it sounds like they're in front of you. So you can now create it so as well as, the world moving as you look around, all those sounds are now glued to that world. So instead of just hearing, a static stereo mix in your headphones, it actually sounds like you move your head around. Say you're on the street and, you're looking at a road, you hear the cars go by. If you turn, that sound is now coming more in your left ear than your right ear. So it's another full level of immersion that helps us tell those stories.
I've had a little bit of fun at VRLA. They had a workshop on editing spatial audio. So sort of thinking about how to use old tools and new tools. Are there tools coming up the road that to help out with some of this? And other than the cameras, I know that you spend a lot of energy stitching and you're looking at different technologies of stitching images. Are there things that will make it easier or that need to be around to make the creation side easier?
Sorry, audio or video?
Either way.
Yeah, I think that, we work a lot more with video than audio. We use a fantastic company, Post Office Sound, here in Toronto. They're very much on the leading edge of immersive audio, so we always sort of work with them on, making the actual sound come through as amazing as possible. On the visual side, it's let me now think of what I'm saying here.
Any wish lists of things that you wish were around or that would other that save you energy, time, visualization, or just make it a more magical experience?
Yeah, as far as video innovation, I think that in the next few years we'll be very much closer to cameras that require far, far less post-production and produce a much higher resolution image with better dynamic range, that cause less motion sickness, that are just a better representation of the actual image. Right now, a lot of cameras on the market are still taking other existing cinema cameras and combining them and then having to combine those multiple images seamlessly in post-production, which just takes forever and is costly and requires high-end hardware. So I think we're definitely looking forward to eventually seeing purpose-built cameras, which are starting to come out now and have come a long way in the last year. But I think especially, in 2017, 2018, we're going to start seeing just more and more cameras that are built to just take away that whole middle step for creators. The whole idea is that, right now, if you want to shoot just a regular 16 by 9 product, you can get a camera, you can go out, and you can tell a story. And I think the goal eventually is to get it to be the same way with 360 and VR, where, storytellers don't have to understand stitching and they don't have to understand these multiple levels, where it's just making the technology more accessible.
So I have interesting conversations with people about VR and music, and there is so much going on, but your average person doesn't seem to know there's so much going on. When I talk to people about, well, there's some really great examples, and people will bring up Jazz Cartier, your wonderful work there, and they'll bring up the Bjork work. And I've seen a few other interesting things that are getting visibility now. Other than your own work, whose work are you excited about? And can you point to great examples if someone wants to see where things are going in, especially music in VR, but great VR?
Felix and Paul from Montreal, Canada. They're doing they do some of, I think, the best looking VR, as well as some of the best stereoscopic work. Yeah, everything they make is always great. They do a lot of Cirque du Soleil things. They just had something come out. And I think they did the People's House, which is a White House tour with Barack Obama, which was a whole experience they just built. So yeah, I think they're definitely some of the leaders as far as what cinematic VR standards can be. And they're Canadian, which is great.
Anybody else that you really admire in their work? I tend to think of Chris Milk's work, which I really love, and I've been able to enjoy some of his pieces. Anybody else on the music side?
Well, first off, Chris Milk is like, the OG. I literally didn't even think I needed to mention Chris Milk because, he was the original. Music-wise, I really liked the piece that Gorillaz did. They just did a fully animated 360 video that I thought was super well done, not only from the actual animation side, but just concept and art direction and execution. Yeah, I thought that was a great piece.
Great. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, and you've done a lot of great work and creating fearlessly already. Anything that you'd like to have as last thoughts here as we wrap up?
I think what we're excited for moving forward is to definitely do more work in the creative space as well as the narrative space in VR. I think a lot of people are still trying to sort of crack what it is to make good narrative VR and figure out how to tell those stories and how to utilize those tools. And so I think that's a very exciting space that people are going to start exploring. And I think what's also going to be interesting is seeing how distribution and places to find those works are going to start emerging. Because I think right now what needs to happen is we'll eventually need to get a Netflix-style service where you're paying a monthly premium and they're doing a curated list of works. I find the biggest problem with 360 in VR right now is there's a flood of things all sort of in the same boat where it's hard to find, things that had $100,000 budget and things that was somebody shooting in their backyard. So I think that as we move forward and more real content creators are putting out work and having that recognized and being able to find those easier, as well as, people coming out with better and better narrative works, I think just the whole industry is, constantly moving forward together. And I think that especially the distribution part needs to catch up right now.
Connor, it's been great talking with you, and I'm very excited to see all the continuing work that you are doing. And thank you very much for joining us.
Gigi, thanks so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Great. Well, that wraps up this podcast. Many thanks to the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music and the UCLA Center for Music Innovation for being our hosts of this ongoing series. You can subscribe to us in all the usual places, or you can come find us at innovation.schoolofmusic.ucla.edu. Join us again to follow the other adventures that we will be tracking down in Innovating Music. Thanks again.